Welcome to Black and White Movies. I'm Jared, and
I'm Danielle.
this is where we discuss two movies that are thematically bonded to one another or have some other connective tissue that warrants examination. We are your guides to this conversation. Today we are discussing 1992's Malcolm X and 2019's Joker. So, Danielle, why don't you start off and give us a quick synopsis of Joker?
Forever alone in a crowd, failed comedian Arthur...
Wait. Are you reading this offline off of some website?
Stop. Don't do that to me.
I told you we have to write unique 2 to 3 sentence
I'm
introductions.
going to tag it. Please forgive me. I'm in the midst of making a movie right now, and I'm busy.
Humble brag, okay.
Forever alone in the crowd, failed comedian Arthur Flick seeks a connection as he walks through the streets of Gotham. Arthur wears 2 masks. One he paints for his day job as a clown, and the other, guys, he projects in a futile attempt to feel like he's a part of the world around him. Isolated, bullied, disregarded by society, Flick begins a slow descent into madness as he transforms into criminal mastermind known as Joker.
Wow, okay, so that's a great original synopsis of the biopic about Joker. Now I will summarize the biopic about Malcolm X. And Malcolm X is a Spike Lee joint about Malcolm X, starring Denzel Washington as the black Muslim leader. And this movie more or less follows the major events of the man's life, kind of in a series of 3 periods of his life. And so if you don't know anything about Malcolm X, sure, this is a great introduction to the man. And it's also just a good Spike Lee movie.
Yes, it is. I think it would be best to probably talk about the Joker first. And here's why. I'm going to qualify this because it seems like a weird mashup, but I think it is the only way we're going to have to go forward in our podcast, which is finding things, similarities where they don't exist because of the lack of putting things on equal footing in this business. So we don't get to see an Asian Joker or a black Joker. We get to see the white Joker, right?
Well, both movies are controversial when they came out for different reasons. And this movie, even if you try not to watch trailers or read think piece articles, people are giving you a lot of ideas of what this movie is before you even go into it, that it would incite white supremacist violence or mental health related violence is one thing going into it. I tried to avoid all that and just go in to see a movie. How about you?
I tweeted you this month probably before it came out, right? And I was there for it from the beginning, just on the fact that I loved Batman from back in the 90s, right? I think for sure that I was there for it just for that purpose. I've always been, into the Joker as a character from the TV series. Yes, I will tell my age in a moment, all the way up until now. Yeah. And so I was interesting on this take of the Joker. And I've seen every Batman film in rendition, and why not follow this kind of offset of this breakout piece of that world, the Gotham world, which was always very fascinating.
I definitely, as a youth, enjoyed the Adam West series, and I enjoyed the Tim Burton films, but then that kind of fell off after that for me. I look at Batman now as just kind of like a rich brat who could do a lot better things with his money, than putting on a costume and getting these high gear toys to beat up small time robbers and drug dealers and stuff. But this movie kind of highlighted that because they show you what Wayne Enterprises does to this city, and you kind of see the rot the city's falling into with a garbage strike, and the class struggle between rich and poor people is the constant backdrop to this movie. Which I like that message because to me, Bruce Wayne, and by extension his father and Wayne Industries, if they had saved the social services of this city, you wouldn't have a Joker.
Well, I think that the reason why I was always so interested in Gotham was because it is so very, of course it's taken after New York City, but it could probably be any city USA with these type of oppressive and inequalities in the wealthy, the very high rich, and then there's those that you throw away. So it could have been Chicago, it could have been LA. Coming out of Gotham, it speaks to now the extreme wealth inequality, throwing away, like let's say, go with the homeless, right? So anybody who people don't deem as worthy of being a part of this society. It speaks to that sentiment. Now, do I think that, the rich are going to come and save us all? Hell no. Hell no, nor should they. I don't believe in billionaires at all. Right?
But if someone had just taxed Wayne Industries more, they could have had some social services in that city and paid the garbage people.
Yeah, that's probably a very simplistic way of thinking about it. So I think it's an oversimplified version.
I think it's a good way to look at it.
It's one way to look at it.
Tax the rich, or I think that you have a choice: tax the rich or kill the rich, as this movie posits.
That's very black and white, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, because people are more complex than that, and I think that we should give it more thought. For me, I don't give permission. Maybe I chose not to see it as, giving white supremacists permission to do anything. I thought it was very dangerous considering the amount of mass murders that are going on, white kids killing each other in schools, which they never ever say that a white kid did it, right? They never say that, which is crazy to me. But so for me, it seems to be a little bit neglectful.
Oh, the Joker movie.
Yeah. I
don't look to movies to have that kind of responsibility, and I like the way violence was portrayed in this movie because there wasn't a lot of instances of violence, but the violence was portrayed as realistic in the sense that it was stark, heavy, and they had a human impact to it. Others have compared it to John Wick, where the murder count is way higher, but there's no impact to the murder.
There's no emotional connection. Well, that's why it's dangerous, right? Because you kill somebody that I've met, that I know, right? That's going to hurt me. If I see people killed on the news, I'm like, oh, that's sad.
Yeah.
Right? But if I knew them, I'm like, oh my God, that was John. He used to go running by every morning. That means something. Mm-hmm. And so for me, for him to choose who he killed in this movie, that is actually what made it dangerous. Yeah. Not the fact that it was random, because it wasn't random, right? It was selective and it was reactive.
He was killing people based on what he saw as personal slights against him, and
that's kind of not how you do that, right? We teach our children. I teach my son that you have to find a better way. We're humans on this planet in an experience, and you don't do that. You don't kill people. That's kind of one of the main things you don't do.
So far, I don't think this film has inspired any murders, and I didn't see this as what they were front-loading all the talk about of this being white supremacist violence. For everything Joker was, he wasn't a racist at all in this movie.
Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, and what it was highlighting, which is definitely in the Batman universe, is mental health issues. Batman is front-loaded with the mythology of Arkham Asylum. All their villains always had a flavor of mental health issues, and they didn't end up in prison. They ended up in Arkham Asylum, the mental health institution. So it was fitting that he
they've
dealt
closed
with.
all down now. Yeah.
Yeah. If Ronald Reagan was in Gotham, he would have closed them all, and they'd just be in regular prison.
Well, I just have to take it a step back. Just because they didn't, it didn't incite any murders, or that it did not overtly target anybody in the movie that deemed to be racist. Him being allowed to get away with it is the part where it's dangerous, and that's the point of it being appealing to white supremacists, right? Because now I can get away with these things, which if it was our buddy Eric over here, or somebody else, there's no way. Malcolm X can't get away with this. He couldn't even suggest by any means necessary protecting yourself and your family, right? And so that is where the difference lies. Yeah.
Now, I think this movie is saying something about class, though, and the social economic conditions of you have mentally unhealthy people who, instead of getting social services, they get driven to have no options. And the Joker even articulates that he doesn't have a big point. Others in the film are following him and being inspired by them. It's implied. Some of that's in his own mental psychosis. But I think while he is inspiring a populist level class struggle, he himself, when he's on the Murray Franklin show, he pretty much says, I don't have any larger point. And he kills his mother because his mother had slighted him and
you think so? You think that's why he did that?
Well, he killed his mom because his mom abused him. And then he killed Murray Franklin because Murray Franklin, a man he idolized, made fun of him. And that's what finally broke him.
I think he killed his mom for a different reason. I think that might have been a piece of it. You always see these mass murderers, they always kill people at home first, right?
Okay.
It's almost as if they can't bear to leave anybody to watch what they're about to do.
Okay.
And so even though he probably resented his mom,
Yeah.
he probably didn't want to further be seen as bad in her eyes,
Yeah.
you know? And so he put her out of her misery so not to watch the terror he was about to go on.
Yeah.
You probably are right, and maybe I'm right too, but
It's an interesting way to look at it, but I think what undercuts that point is when the other clowns, the one who sold him the gun, and then the little person clown are in his apartment. He chose to kill the man who had given him the gun because that man had lied about him at work and made fun of him, but he didn't kill the little person. And if he's being this calculated killer who has a grand scheme, that's a witness right there. He definitely would have killed him. But the fact he let him go shows that this is a really personal, emotional thing for him, and he's not necessarily thinking in a calculated way.
well, that kind of proves my point, doesn't it? That kind of proves the point that says that he wouldn't want his mom to see that. Like, I think we're attributing thoughts in a person who has mental problems,
Yeah.
minds that they can kind of choose these
Yeah.
type of rationales, which I don't think they can. I don't think that's possible. With the way I saw it, it didn't seem like it was a mercy kill. He didn't shoot her or harm her. He smothered her. He shot and killed and violently killed everybody else
Yeah.
that we saw. For her, he suffocated her and it went quick, right? So to me, if you're angry or it's something that's hurtful to you, then you're probably going to do it
Yeah.
a lot more violent. That was the difference in the how he killed his mother kindly, I guess, if you could. Like if you were doing, what do they call it? Euthanasia or something like that.
Euthanasia, yeah.
If he was euthanizing her.
But it is after that moment that he truly becomes the Joker and he transforms. And similar to Malcolm X, actually, every personal transformation comes with a new haircut, a new hairdo, a new look, a new way about you. So Malcolm X and the Joker both carry themselves differently after they transform into who they're going to be. And
Yes.
some people just choose to dance down the stairs to a Gary Glitter song afterwards.
Just like in real life, there are times when you can stop somebody, right? So he was crying out to the social worker. He's crying out to this imaginary relationship with
Yeah.
his girlfriend. And he's crying out to his mother, or he's crying out in so many different ways that this could have easily been averted in terms of how he saw it. I was listening to something, this is a while back when I first saw the film, and it was very interesting. Somebody said that, the only way he interacted was with women and mostly with black women.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, it's saying something about
Yeah.
the socioeconomics of who's on the bottom, right?
Uh-huh.
You're on the bottom because you're crazy. We're on the bottom because we're us, right?
Yeah.
And so that was a different conversation that was interestingly woven into the concept of the film, which is kind of comparatively to Malcolm X. It was different, right? The Black Muslims say, hey, we're going to set ourselves aside. Like, listen, you don't want us around? Hey, no problem. We'll opt out. And
Yeah.
then they're like, hell no, you can't opt
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
What do you
yeah.
mean? Like,
Can't
wait
have
a
your own
minute. Either
system.
you want or you don't.
There's a lot of discussion of, does this handle mental health responsibly? I don't really care if it's kind of like the violence. For me, it's a movie. I don't care if you're extremely responsible or irresponsible. I think it was realistic in the sense that, and for me, this does come down to a simple class issue. That's in this Gotham society, you have a society that's not taking care of people with mental health issues, and so you're going to have ramifications of that. I love his journal, where we see in his journal that the worst part of having a mental illness is people expect you to behave as if you don't. There is this expectation of people who are mentally ill to kind of pass over as if they are feeling okay. It's almost like you're not allowed to express the symptoms of your mental illness.
Yes. One of my favorite comedians, Lavelle Crawford, he has a stick where he talks about his cousin or brother that's mentally ill. And, you're like, hey, stop acting retarded. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and it's a cultural thing sometimes where, you better stand up and act right. When we go in the store, you better get it together. But like you said, it's not about it being politically correct. It is not handled carefully in this film. It just kind of brings it to the forefront and gives you like a look into a world, and it just kind of uses it as a layer, as opposed to like, this is clearly not about mental health. This is an excuse. And so for me, the reason why I say it's an excuse, ask yourself this question.
Mm-hmm.
If Joker weren't crazy, right? Or excuse me,
wasn't mentally ill.
Right. And he was an active part of society, and he was the Wall Street guy, right? Mm-hmm. Would he still be the same person? In another world, he could really be those guys.
Yes.
But for the mental illness that he had, but for the, luck he was handed. So to me, that's where we get that fine line of, are we really talking about mental health? Or are we talking about you being pissed off that you don't get to achieve what others that look like you achieve?
You can't be a great comedian. You
right.
can't. Although the violence is stark and realistic, there was fun violence when he did kill the two yuppie preppy guys on the train. That was fun, and it
three
seemed.
Of them.
It's three of them. It seemed, you're right. It seemed righteous in that moment. So it could have gone the way where he's like your anti-American Psycho, where he's killing purposefully for class reasons rather than just kind of personal striking out. And that moment was the last kind of fun, violent moment, and the rest got a lot darker after that. But I see that this could have been a totally different movie if it had gone down that path.
Yeah, I mean, I think people did find themselves cheering for that. Now Wall Street is the big bad guy, right? But in Wolf of Wall Street, we're cheering for what's his name, Jordan, whatever his name. Again, we go back to time and place. So I think that it was righteous at that moment. It fit, that goes with good storytelling as well. Meaning we earned it by the time we got there on the train, and we felt for Joaquin Phoenix's character, where we were like, they are really, they're not. This guy's different. We need you to recognize that, and they're just, So they deserved it, and so we earned it for the movie. Yeah. Did we earn it in real life? Hell no. We haven't earned the right for capital punishment for any reason.
Yeah. Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal and the character in general, there was a depth to the character where I had sympathy, and I think it illustrated real social, cultural problems we have in society. The fears people had that this is a person people would identify with and act out in copycat violence, I think were unfounded. And for me, the final scene that kind of puts this all in perspective is the scene with Murray Franklin where he shoots him. Because the dialogue, the monologue the Joker has, isn't this impactful, come to Jesus, great monologue. He actually is revealing how shallow his perspective is, where he says, I'm not doing this for any reason. He says, do people like Thomas Wayne know what it is like to be men like me? He gives a very sad performance and then just shoots the guy in the face. So he's not this eloquent Shakespearean it's not like that network moment. You're not on his side in that moment. You're just sad for him.
Yeah, I think that's the danger. That is the part for me to continue with the reason why these killings in the movie are much more irresponsible than, and I hate to call it irresponsible because I'm kind of with you. I don't want movies to have that sort of obligation. I want them to be able to be art. But unfortunately, people are sheep. They don't read. They don't think a lot of times. And if you're mad at me, I don't really care. I said it. People do look to, you don't take the opposite side. So like, yes, you may feel some sort of camaraderie with the Joker, but do you also think like, maybe that's kind of crazy. Don't shoot the person that you're going on, in front of live television. So in that particular scene, when he goes up there, it was shocking for me, which I'm not usually shocked. I didn't expect him to kill himself like he planned to do, but I definitely did not anticipate him killing the Murray character. The part that was much more sinister was that is his transition. He had permission. His mother is gone. He had nothing else to lose. He'd already killed all these people. He had the wind behind his back with the rest of the people. And so they put the battery in his back, and he just went on, and he's going on to become whoever he is forming to be. So the next rendition of the Joker, which...
That's what violence is like in this world, though. It's sudden, it's fast, it's unexpected.
And it ramps up.
It's complicated, and that's why I appreciated it. To me, that's what made this a good-ass movie better than your average superhero movie, because I got a different range of emotions watching it. So, there are stupid people out there, so there are Nazis that watch, say, Romper Stomper or American History X, and then it's like they never saw the third act of the film, which says that's all bullshit, bad philosophy, and they all end up loving those movies. So there are stupid people who will watch this movie, maybe use it in some way. I don't think this is going to incite violence, but they may use that in their worldview
justification
and be violent people in general. At the end of the day, I think culture reflects us more than it influences us. So I did appreciate this overall.
You think
take
so?
on the
You think
Joker.
you're sticking? That's your story. You're sticking to it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I appreciate you for giving people that much credit. That's great.
Yeah, well, thank you for
You're
that
welcome.
rhetorical kind of way of putting that.
Yeah. No, I do. This really is a very hopeful outlook on society, because I don't have it.
Well, do we want to talk about Malcolm X a little bit before we compare the two movies?
Please, by all means.
I'm not a big biopic guy, but when I
Had
watch
you ever seen this?
Yeah, I saw it on VHS in that double shell pack VHS when it first came out at the video store. Probably haven't seen it since it first came to VHS, so it was a rewatch for me. But I'm not a big biopic guy, and this kind of hits those biopic notes where it's like, this event happens, this event happens, this event happens. And even though you might have a larger thematic structure, it doesn't really always feel like a movie to me. But this movie, it's very cinematic. It's almost like it's like in 3 acts. You get his early hustler days, you get his kind of prison transformation days, and then you see the civil rights leader that we all know now. And I think it's the kind of movie that is what this would best serve is showing this to kids who don't know who Malcolm X is, and it kind of encapsulates that time and that person.
Yeah, it was epic. And so, in full disclosure, I am Malcolm X, by the way.
I am Malcolm X.
I am Malcolm X. So it was extremely impactful. I read the autobiography of Malcolm X in the 5th grade.
The Alex Haley.
Yes.
Yeah.
I recently bought it for my son. And so to see it on the big screen at this time, during this era, was very inspiring. To see Denzel Washington's portrayal of Malcolm X so respectfully was something to watch in person. And it was different than the book, clearly. Mm-hmm. But like you said, it was a cinematic look at his life that hadn't taken place, and it was done very respectfully. I think it was done a little bit too respectfully at some points, and it wasn't very honest in some of his life and his controversy. So sometimes when you're telling your own story, everybody's a hero of their own story, right? Yeah. And so you don't get a chance to see where your faults are. Yeah. So he learned his faults later on in the movie, which was a good cinematic arc for the film. But while he was going through it, he was a lot more reflective in life than it was in this film.
The privilege of history is that you do get to kind of refract the bend of historical events so that you can tell the story of what you want to be in the future. And we see that so much with white American history, where we rewrite the founding of this country and everything. Right. And so I think it is fitting and appropriate to distill a person's life, like Malcolm X's life, to what was he going for, what was his point, and how did he impact the world. And so I did feel like it was responsible in the sense that you got a strong sense of where he came from, who he was, and where he was trying to shepherd like black people in America too.
Without a doubt. You could tell that Spike Lee put his heart and soul into the movie, meaning he did not take one beat for granted, nor did Ernest Dickerson, nor did Denzel Washington. Everyone who participated in this felt like this was the most important thing that they had done to date. Yes. And you can tell it was left there on the screen. Yeah. So much that when you see when you see Denzel, or when I saw Denzel for many years, I only saw Malcolm X. It's a tribute to that sort of filmmaking.
It's a historical epic ass movie, and like you get like great costumes, great period pieces. You get to go to Egypt, so you see all that. And I struggle to see who else could have played this character as well as Denzel Washington.
Right now, like how can you, right?
Yeah.
So he kind of dropped the mic after that was over with the Malcolm X character.
But if you haven't read a note of what Malcolm X was about, heard any of his speeches, watched this movie, what we're told in history is the very glib view is you have Martin Luther King, who's like the nice guy who deplores violence, and you have Malcolm X, who's like the tougher guy that inspires violence. And this doesn't do justice to either person. Who Martin Luther King, towards the end of his life, he came to see instances where violence or more aggressive defensive action is justified. And Malcolm X, although he died a very violent way, in his life, he wasn't a very violent person, especially after his conversion to Islam. And he, in fact, preached peace. So I think that's why the people who should be seeing this movie are people who have a very glib idea of who Malcolm X was.
Malcolm X was always very consistent in being self-interested, right? Because no one else is on Black people's behalf, saying, hey, you know what? You don't need the approval of this thing. You can do it on your own, or we can do it together. They did the same thing. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King became a lot more connected.
Yes, yeah.
Ideologically at the end, which was a problem, clearly. And unfortunately, we don't know what that would have been, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with, the Black Panthers. So you got to demonize these people who, are saying, hey, no, we're not saying go out and kill anybody. We're saying protect yourself from the oppression. And so that story, here's where we're talking about revisionist history, is not ever told to the masses. And you're right. The people who need to see the story don't want to, because let me tell you why. Because we need to see the Joker. Like, I need to see myself reflected. This doesn't look like me. And to me, this looks like you're getting rid of me, as opposed to, not me, because I'm clearly the melanin rich, right? Yeah. But, so they can't identify, whereas I can identify, with a Joker character and a Malcolm X character. But can you identify and see yourself through Malcolm's eyes, or can you see yourself through both lenses, right?
I personally can, in the sense that Malcolm X, the Joker, they identified problems in this world, both through events that had happened to them and events they saw. They both had an opposite approach, whereas the Joker became chaotic. Malcolm X became very controlled. After his conversion to Islam, he prioritized his self-behavior. He became almost an impeccably perfect person in moral standing, and that's what he inspired in the people around him to follow kind of these Nation of Islam laws. And so you could not assuage his personage because he was impeccable. Didn't drink, didn't smoke, none of the white man's vices, didn't fuck white women anymore, and that's what he went to jail for, as they point out in the first place, not the burglary, but the fact he was fucking white women with his friend. It's like you couldn't impugn his character. We're going to make our own world on top of this world separate, because the white man's world is one of violence.
So the question that you end up having to ask yourself, right? Why is it we can look at it through that same point of view, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, don't fuck the white women, don't do this, don't do that. But how come that very same idea, right, which is what happened to him? So this is where it differs from a movie as opposed to a life story, right? Those were the things that ended up being his ultimate downfall. So because of what he experienced with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, right, and him, being having infidelity issues and babies all over the place, that devastated him, right? Because he took this to the height, right? He thought that, we're doing this together, and you come to find out that your heart's broken, that the person that you looked up to so much doesn't even believe it.
Yeah, so
it's all a con too, You know, that ended up ultimately being the downfall. Now,
But he wasn't in this movie. Forgetting the real story, he wasn't wrong, and he went about it responsibly. He splinters off from the Nation of Islam. He goes to charter his own Muslim group. He wasn't necessarily wrong, and I felt he was
I
trying
didn't
to be
say it was
respectful.
wrong. I said that was life.
Yeah.
Meaning, in real life, in a movie, it probably would have happened
Yeah.
a different way, right? But in real life, that ended up being the thing that ultimately
Yeah.
fractured him off from his. You know,
Like we saw with Martin Luther King, I don't want to blame the Nation of Islam necessarily, because we saw that they implied in this movie that the FBI may have had a lot to do with that too. We know the FBI had agents involved in Nation of Islam and the Black Panthers and stuff. So Malcolm X dies violently, and it highlights the splinter and the fissure he had with the Nation of Islam, and possibly like FBI infiltration.
I will talk about a quote that I don't know verbatim, but I know that Booker T. Washington said it, which I'm not a huge fan of Booker T. Washington's ideology, but he said something very telling, and that is on both sides. So whether it's Malcolm X fighting white supremacy, or whether it's Martin Luther King trying to, you know, love us into a new way of seeing the world, is that Black people never get a chance to fight white supremacy because we're too busy fighting amongst ourselves.
Yes, yeah.
And so you just don't even have to, because it's that intrinsic in this culture. And so unfortunately, it's easy to infiltrate, whether it's the Black Muslims, or whether it's, you know, whatever Martin Luther King was doing. It's unfortunate, and it's consistent to this day. It's happening right now.
Yeah.
So
to that point, though, the moment Malcolm X breaks off from Nation of Islam, as the film beautifully portrays, he goes to Mecca, and he has almost his second religious conversion, where he relearns how to incorporate his Islamic faith into his life. And he says, I broke bread with white men, I ate with them. And that he's starting to be more nuanced in his version of race. So when he comes back to the States, whereas earlier he said to a white woman when she said, "What can I do to help?" and he says nothing. Now he says, "We're going to work with white people in this new organization." And similarly to Martin Luther King, with before he died, when he said, "We're going to broaden our scope to for the Poor People's Campaign," Malcolm X is now opening up and seeing that this is a conflict, not necessarily that's white and black, but it's a conflict where it's not necessarily all race.
right.
So it's interesting that both these men were cut down at a time when they were broadening their perspective and their organizational goals to be inclusive of more people.
Well, I think that is also telling of our own state of minds, right? Get outside of your own comfort zone and see what's out there. The only way that you can understand the world is by going to see the world, right?
Yeah.
You leave here, whether you're black, white, or other, and you go abroad, you're an American, period, right? You're not, you know, oh, that's Danielle, the black person. No, that's Danielle, the American, or yes, Jared, the American.
Yeah.
Because in the world, you know, it is nationality that makes the difference. So it's a tragic point of view to see that light was squashed from both sides.
I will say this though: if I'm ever anywhere and I hear someone yell, "Get your hands out of my damn pocket," I'm hitting the floor. I'm hiding.
You better. And he knew.
Yeah.
You know, and they knew that day. Everybody knew that day.
Yeah.
From all perspectives. But the film, let's talk about the movie. Spike Lee, not for nothing, at this time was one of my favorite filmmakers. He could do no wrong, do the right thing. She's Gotta Have It, School Days. You know, he went on Jungle Fever, just epic classics, you know, not so much now for me. But then at that time, you know, he was really dialed in. And so his portrayal of Malcolm X and taking his time with that story and giving him, being honest about his criminal history was very great. And to get to see all the way to Mecca was such a journey. His strength right at the height of his power and influence was a feat. Now, to compare it to the Joker, and why I think is a good point to compare these two fringe characters, because even though now he's such a revered figure.
The Joker you're talking about.
I'm talking about Malcolm
Oh,
X.
Malcolm X. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
We're not revering the Joker, Jared, unless you have a whole
Oh,
different
okay.
different T-shirt. You got like
Yeah.
Joker X or something. What are you doing?
I am Joker.
So for him to him to be an iconic and revered character now, he wasn't so much at the time of
Yes.
his
Yeah.
existence, unfortunately. You know, you can look back and we talk about things all the time that don't hold up. His rhetoric holds up to this day. As a matter of fact, it's almost like a foretelling of what's going to happen now.
Yeah.
Joker, in the similar way, is showing us, it shows us, you know, how if you don't pay attention to those around you who are marginalized, like blacks in Malcolm X's world in the 60s, right? If you don't pay attention to that, then you are going to probably end up in a place where you don't want to be.
It kind of gives you instructions for how you can live your own life too. Like you can be a person that has had evil and violence inflicted on you, or a person who has observed evils and violence, and you can react two separate ways. And what I love about Malcolm X is he looks to his philosophy and he looks to his personal character, and he acts forthright in a way that is much better to me than lashing out and harming others.
You know, in his writings, in his speakings, in his approach to his teachings, they were always very thoughtful.
Yes.
Whether it's his own perspective, he qualifies it and makes sure that it's not as self-involved. That's shown throughout the movie. For example, he knows that he's a charismatic character, right? Or a charismatic being or person. There's a scene where the young man wants to become a part of the nation, but he's enthralled by the power that they demonstrate at the police station, right? When these kids get beat up. And so that is a draw. But he is protective of him to say, hey, well, why do you, why do you want to do that? And that is...
He puts him in check.
Yes, and that's telling. And I think that's... a good characteristic that isn't often seen. Somebody usually at that sort of would want to bring anybody in.
Any recruits, bring them in, but
like whoever.
Yeah.
But he's like, that's not for everybody.
It's like Fight Club where they make you stand on the porch for 3 days. So you got to.
Exactly.
The end of both these movies ends in an act of violence. One, the Joker's perpetrating. In the other, Malcolm X, it happens to him. In both movies, you really feel the impact of that violence. So
today, I was listening to a documentary on Malcolm X, and Betty Shabazz, his wife, was talking about it to a reporter. And they showed the graphic images after he was killed, and I cried. Like, this was a long-ass time ago. And it hurt me today. Today, it hurt me. Not so much because they killed him, but because that he knew, and because that it was tragic in terms of what else he had to give, right? So it seems like such a weird combination to put Joker against such a iconic figure. But if you start to think about film in terms of how it reads to people, how people are allowed to think. This is what people read now. People read movies, right? And so if you start to read the Joker in a similar fashion, you're going to start to see something as similar as two characters isolated from this world, but trying to make a way and forge a path. Right?
And it's tragic that Malcolm X had to die over some petty-ass shit. And
Super
really,
petty.
The Joker, his finality came over some petty shit, too. You could have extended a helping hand to a hurt, broken person.
But unlike the Joker, who will go on to make a sequel and kill many more people, I'm sure they'll up the body count. Malcolm X doesn't get that chance, does he? Not only that, they actually killed a part of that sort of activism.
Yeah.
That was the point.
That's what really they cut down when you cut down these great leaders, is you cut down the movement that's behind them.
That's right. Do you remember who came after him?
In the Nation of Islam? It was not Farrakhan?
It was Farrakhan, and then it was Khalid Muhammad. There was a time when he was on Donahue. I watched it a couple weeks ago, and the funniest thing about that was I don't remember seeing it, but he was even more militant than Malcolm, which
Yeah,
I didn't think was
yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
Farrakhan is a very charismatic person, but he is very similar to Malcolm X, but he took what Malcolm couldn't, that harshness,
Yeah.
and he softened it. But Khalid Muhammad, right afterwards, they were like, he went hard in that particular way. I encourage you to look him up and check out that Donahue
I'll look
episode.
up- I'm always up for a good Donahue episode. Love Donahue.
I was like, you'll never see this on TV this day and age. It will never happen.
But I'm going to say I wish there was, I appreciated everything Malcolm X had to say. And to me, nothing he said was out of bounds or as it was depicted as dangerous, violent language or anything. Like, what really fissured him from the Nation of Islam is his after JFK was assassinated, and he said that's chickens coming home to roost. But name one thing about anything he said that was wrong. He had a very simple message. As a nation, as a white race, when you put evil into this world, you're going to get evil reflected back to you. And specifically JFK, who accelerated the Vietnam War, was putting violence out into this world as a man. A violent act then fell upon himself.
Right. And was not as, he was not as pro-black as people would like him to believe. He was actually the opposite. So, and rich and wealthy and, entitled and all that other stuff that we could see now. But he was ahead of his time. I think it was probably timing. He said that at a time that, he was expressly told not to say that.
Yeah.
So that was a totally different type of rebellion. But that's the kind of person that he was, right?
But I think the lesson though too is when you're a Malcolm X figure and you're reviled like that, anything you're going to say is going to be twisted and used as weaponized against you. So why not just keep it level and keep it real and really speak truth to power?
Can power be told the truth?
Well, yeah. I just wish Malcolm
You said
X,
yes?
It can, but
power
you will
can be
cut
told the
down.
truth. Right. So
You
I'm
will be
saying
cut
no,
down.
basically.
Yeah.
Is no, you can say it, but
like in the modern equivalent, if Malcolm X had Twitter and he put that on Twitter, he'd have his account suspended by
Right,
Jack.
exactly.
And he'd be Twitter banished rather than shot down.
He'd probably be both.
And then be shot down.
Yeah, then be shot down. Yeah. So, I think that where we are in this world now, we could look at both sides of the coin, and we could say it's always good to remove yourself from both things and look at it objectively. I could see flaws with Malcolm X and his approach. I could see flaws clearly with the Joker.
Yeah.
But I couldn't see them at the time, which this goes back to Malcolm X's character and the reason why I said that the Joker is so dangerous. So let's say I'm 14, 15 years old and I'm watching the Joker.
Yeah.
I'm not a grown person in having life experiences.
Yeah.
Malcolm X did form my understanding and who I am and how I see the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in that same respect, somebody this year might, a younger child who doesn't know themselves quite yet, maybe see themselves hanging out on the fringes of society, and they see themselves through this character, and this is how you solve problems. Unfortunately, there is no context to movie. There's so much information out there that is harmful at times, because even when I took my son to see it, who probably plays the most violent video games in the whole entire world, was like, oh, mommy, that's pretty violent.
Yeah.
Which I thought it was a shock to hear, a young person who deals with, these crazy violent video games.
And go home and shoot a bunch of people
Right.
online. Yeah.
Exactly. But he doesn't know them.
Yeah.
Right. Those are animated figures. These were characters that you were supposed to be built up and known to love.
Yeah.
You don't do that to people. It was a mom.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting that if my son goes crazy, he should kill me? But I'm saying it's at a time when a mind is formidable, that sometimes you have to be careful of what you put into it.
You made me think of and remember why I saw Malcolm X in the first place, and think of myself as a youngster. Because if I can say an embarrassing little aside, I remember the reason I rented and watched from West Coast Video and watched Malcolm X was I was watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air one time, and Uncle
He
Phil,
had on the X hat, huh?
Uncle Phil berated Will Smith's character. He said, "Will, do you even know why you have that Malcolm X poster on the wall? Do you know anything about the man?" And just berated his character, and I felt like Uncle Phil was berating me. So I went out and rented the movie. So I think the lesson is, if you have a kid in your life, make them feel ignorant for what they don't know about history, and watch a good ass movie like Malcolm X. And like, this is a movie where you can actually, I feel this, unlike a lot of biopics, does respect to the history and the man, and it gives you a full picture of the man's philosophy and how they got to it. And sprinkled throughout, you get the big moments, the big speeches. So it's very successful in that regard to me.
Yeah, I mean, clearly you can't, if you Google Malcolm X, you could see probably a good year's worth of his speaking with no problem.
Yeah.
Which is very wonderful. That's the gift of social media. And the movie is very light, like you said, of his ideology. You got to kind of see him do it as opposed to hear him say it, which I kind of respect a little bit more. It was more of a action adventure.
It works as a movie. It's an enjoyable ass movie. It's fun. It's funny.
Yeah.
And what we didn't mention is it's bookended by Rodney King and Nelson Mandela, which, fitting for this film, kind of happened right around before its release. You had the King beating, and then you had Nelson Mandela released from jail. So Spike Lee got to include those moments in the movie, much like with Black Klansman, where he put the Charlottesville events and stuff in there. But you got to that current events brought into it, and you joked with the "I am Malcolm X," but that is, you get the goosebumps at the end when everyone's saying that.
I think that was the point at the time, right? Like that you wanted to inform a generation.
Yeah.
Again, if we're gonna go with cinematic, Malcolm X holds up. It is a very serious movie, but very enjoyable to this day. That is any movie that could stand the test of time like that. To me, says that those filmmakers took that kind of care. So I hats off to Spike Lee and his amazing team and amazing financial backers who came up with the balance of that money to make that happen.
Yeah, because the movie was going off the rails, and you had to have, like, I think Oprah Winfrey and Cosby and a lot of other people.
Well,
and Spike Lee himself invest in the movie.
Yeah, what happened was it didn't go off the rails. They sold it into international markets. For less than it would normally. They undercut it.
So some white supremacist malarkey.
So it was like they sold it for $8 million as opposed to 20 like they would normally, or something like that. Don't get me right on these figures. That just left them with a $20 million or so deficit that they had to come up with because it was undersold in the international market.
And the equivalent is nowadays they would make him re-edit it for China with like different dialogue and everything. So do we want to commit to what's the wokest and the wackest here? It's a draw, right? They're both really woke.
They're super woke. There's nothing whack about either of these movies. I think I was a fan of both. I would never call Malcolm X whack. Same way I wouldn't call Joker whack. As a matter of fact, I think Joaquin Phoenix, he wins the Oscar.
We didn't give him enough credit how delightful he is to watch, but
that laugh alone, his commitment to that weird ass character, and his transition into the Joker was so enjoyable for me.
I want to go dancing with him on Girls' Night Out. I want to cut a rug with Joaquin Phoenix.
I'm gonna let you do that and report back. Maybe you can go to karaoke.
But I want to go on record first and say Malcolm X is the wokest, Joker's the wackest. I'll take a stand.
Yeah, I don't think that clearly they don't compare. So we just had to
Well, they're
have a reason to
two
pull.
biopics about important American figures.
That's disrespectful. I should slap your ass for saying that. Yeah, okay. That's your story. You're sticking to it. I'll say that Malcolm X is the wokest, and Joker is woke.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Cool. Fair
Yeah.
enough. So let's talk a little bit of behind the scenes. You mentioned the budget problems in this. Malcolm X was, of course, written from the book by Malcolm X himself and Alex Haley. And there was a earlier screenplay by Arnold Pearl, but then Spike Lee, of course, directed it. And like you mentioned, he was at the height of his powers at this point. It was like his sixth film. All of his touches are in this movie. My favorite being, of course, the gliding down the street without taking a stride. I love it. I could watch every moment of every movie like that. But it had his touches. But I would say he almost pulled back a little and went with a classic. This is an epic film. The cinematography's gorgeous. The editing's excellent. The production design's amazing. And almost every scene, he puts his camera in just the right place. So.
Yeah, Ernest Dickerson shot the hell out of this movie. Sometimes you leave it all on the stage, and they did with this. I think that it makes a huge difference that Black people are telling their own story.
Yeah.
I'm not. There were rumors clearly that this was going to be a white director. Earlier on, this was, a property that people wanted to tell, just like they wanted to tell the Martin Luther King story, which, not for nothing, the story of Ava DuVernay's version of Martin Luther King pales in comparison for so many reasons. But this being told in such a way by such a strong group of people who clearly have worked together before, a team, I think that synergy is shown on film.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to compare it to behind the scenes, the cadre of people who made Joker, it's looking a lot wider when you look at them. But Todd Phillips, a lot was said about him running up to this film about, he's going serious now. But of course he had... when Hangover came out, the word was, it's shot like a gritty action movie, but it's a comedy. So we know he always kind of had an eye for this kind of cinematography, this kind of tone. And he didn't dial the channel as much as he's getting credit for with the Joker. And I think his film previously to this was like War Dogs or something, which...
Stars Born.
Todd Phillips did Stars Born? Okay, yeah. So he's been flexing his tonal muscles for a while. And
that was very... me. Yeah. I told you last year. That was such a great movie.
Stars Born?
Yeah.
I haven't seen any of the Stars Borns yet.
Well, I've never seen the original, which is probably why I love this one. Because everybody who did thinks it was shit, but I thought it was fantastic. Yeah. And came home and cried for a whole weekend. But it was really good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think this film, Joker, Scorsese nearly directed it, and there was a falling out or something. And it's funny now that he's having the whole beef with comic book movies, but it was almost a Scorsese film. But instead, we got a Todd Phillips film that just looks like every other Scorsese film.
Right.
A lot of.
I'm going to tell you honestly, I really can't stand green tinted movies, which there's so many of them, and this was one of them. I bypassed it for the story. But this color palette that a lot of films tend to take on that have this kind of moldy, maybe they think that that's in lieu of...
the sodium gels and the...
Yeah, so it might be a thing like, this is supposed to give you the feeling of the 80s. It just makes me sick.
I'd say 70s more than... it. I appreciate it. It gives me that feeling of the...
That's fine.
It's made it the movie, whereas Malcolm X felt like a grand epic in its own way. This felt like that gritty 70s film in its own way. So
it was already like I get the reason it was well used here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked his. And you know what? I'm gonna go back real quick. I liked his sessions with his social worker. I thought those were probably the most telling parts
Yeah.
of this film.
Yeah.
And who he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
I have a final thought. I have
All
a final
right.
question, actually.
All right.
If we didn't mash up Malcolm X and the Joker, what would you mash up with the Joker?
With the Joker, not with the Malcolm X.
I'm going to ask both.
Okay. What would I mash up with the Joker? God, it's with superhero genres. That's really hard to say because we don't get like, quote unquote, black superhero movies. And so if you're going for superhero, I mean, you don't have a lot of options. You got like Spawn or the Black Panther. Or
So you're going to go
and you
real
don't-
specific
and you definitely
to
don't
that.
get these anti-heroes. Well, the first place
Well, that's
you
what I was
of
going to
is-
think, like anti-hero, if you could think of a black anti-hero. Okay, forget it. Let's extend it because we know we don't make black movies like that. Let's just
But
talk
we
about
can
any
now.
other. Let's go with Nacho
Talking
Libre, right?
Joker?
Go anywhere.
Joker?
So, yeah, to mash up with Joker.
I would compare it to one of the 70s movies. It's kind of refracting. So like King of Comedy or Taxi Driver or something like that.
That's good. Serpico.
Yeah, Serpico's.
Uh-huh.
Serpico's my boy though. I really root for Serpico.
Oh, yeah. Heck yeah. I totally rooted for Serpico. Okay, Malcolm X. So what would you...
The quick answer top of my head would be like a JFK.
Yeah, I knew you were going to
Yeah.
say that.
So that'd be
Yeah.
the roosting chickens edition of black and white movies.
And both three, we that's like a commitment for like a lifetime. You're like watching 8 hours of film
Yeah.
with both of those movies together, right?
Although I'd say Malcolm X is much more successful as a film. And JFK doesn't really tell the tale of JFK, but
Right. It's
his name's in the title, so.
Yeah, it's a different take on that. Okay.
You
That was
didn't
my
answer.
question.
You didn't answer your own question, but that's okay. if
Oh,
you
I didn't
wanna.
know I was. I
don't have
posed the
to.
question. I don't
That's
want
true,
to because
yeah.
I don't think I have any ideas. I think the only thing that came up for me was kind of like a Dolomite.
Yeah,
If we were gonna do some sort of random character kind
another
of thing.
great biopic. Yeah,
Not really, but it was
another wonderful biopic.
any of the blaxploitation movies. I would probably mash up with the Joker. That's the only thing I have left. That's the only thing left,
Yeah.
right? I can't think of anything else.
I think that Joker mixes better with Petey Wheatstraw than Dolomite.
Let's ask our listening audience if you think you would mash up a different title with the Joker or Malcolm X. What would it be?
Yeah. So, and the way you will get in touch with us to ask us that is you can email us. We do have an email at blackandwhitemoviespodcast@gmail.com. And of course, reach out to us. Join us on Twitter and Instagram at BNW Movies Pod.